What if one small act of kindness could rewrite the future? In a world that often looks the other way, a 17-year-old boy gave up his only meal to help two strangers. What he didn't know? They were millionaires, and they were watching. This is the true story of Darius Johnson, a dishwasher from Elm Street, whose single act of compassion turned into a $25 million gift, not for himself, but for an entire community. Undercover Boss meets real-life miracle. From a rain-soaked diner booth to a building that bears his name. Stay till the end, because the twist will change how you see kindness forever. If you believe character still matters in this world, this story is for you. What if the meal you gave away today came back tomorrow as a life you never imagined? Most people walk past strangers in need, convincing themselves that someone else will help. Most 17-year-olds don't have time to think about kindness when hunger claws at their stomach, when survival overshadows generosity. But Darius Johnson was never like most kids. At 7:42 p.m., on a rain-slick Tuesday night, inside a nearly empty diner on the corner of 5th and Main, Darius made a decision that would crack his life wide open. To understand the weight of that decision, you have to understand the cost. For 3 days, Darius had eaten nothing but peanut butter sandwiches and half bananas he smuggled home from the break room. He skipped sodas and after-school snacks. He walked 3 miles to work and 3 miles back, saving every dollar, every coin, for one purpose: to buy himself a meal. A real one. Something hot. Something that didn't come from a vending machine or a brown paper bag. Tonight was supposed to be his night. A small celebration he'd quietly planned for himself. A burger, fries, and maybe, if the totals lined up right, a slice of apple pie. But just as the tray hit the counter, just as he was about to slide into the booth he'd been eyeing since lunch, Darius saw them. An elderly couple sat in the corner booth, soaked from the November downpour. The man wore a suit, though it clung to his frame like wet paper. The woman's silver hair was matted against her forehead, her coat hanging heavy with water. They weren't ordering food, just coffee. 2 cups, no refills. Their eyes were cast down, their shoulders folded inward. Something about them felt out of place, like a painting hung on the wrong wall. Darius watched as the woman rifled through her purse for the 3rd time, her hands trembling. She poured its contents onto the table: tissues, receipts, mints, but no wallet. The man patted down his jacket pockets, then the slacks beneath them, his brow furrowing deeper with each failed attempt. His expression didn't scream panic, but something else: disbelief, humiliation. The waitress approached. Darius knew her name was Sandy. Her expression was familiar, one he'd seen on adults forced to deliver bad news. "Folks," she said gently, I hate to press, but the coffee..." The woman flushed. "We're so sorry. I had my wallet when we left. I swear it." Her voice cracked. The man spoke quietly, offering to leave his watch as collateral. Sandy glanced at the kitchen, where Big Mike stood with his arms crossed. Darius didn't need to hear Mike's answer. He already knew it. No wallet, no money, no meal. The couple stood slowly, gathering their things. The man straightened his shoulders, maintaining what little dignity he had left. The woman clutched a leather portfolio to her chest. Rain lashed against the diner windows. Their broken-down Mercedes waited in the lot like a stranded ship. And there, still sitting on the counter, was Darius's dinner. Still warm, still perfect. 3 days of sacrifice, sitting on a tray. He looked at the food, then at them. He didn't think. He moved. "Sandy," he called, voice steady. "Hold up." The couple turned, startled. The woman's eyes were rimmed red. The man stared with quiet intensity. Darius crossed the diner, tray in hand. "This one's on me tonight." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Sandy blinked. The woman let out a soft gasp. "Oh, sweetheart, we couldn't possibly." Darius set the tray down, slid into the booth. He didn't ask for permission. "My grandma always says," he began, "kindness is the only thing that multiplies when you give it away." The man's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in something sharper. Observation, as if measuring something deeper than Darius could see. The woman glanced down at the tray, then back up at Darius. "We haven't eaten since breakfast," she whispered. "Then let's fix that," Darius said. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their story. He just knew they were hungry, and that he had enough. Just this once. What he didn't know was that this dinner, his dinner, was a test. What he didn't know was that behind that soaked coat and trembling hands were millions of dollars, contracts, and the most life-changing opportunity he'd ever be offered. What he didn't know was that one small act of kindness had just cracked open the door to a future bigger than he ever dared to dream. And someone, somewhere, was watching closely. What Darius didn't see, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that this wasn't just a random moment of generosity. It was an audition. And the couple he thought he was helping, they were watching much more than his kindness. Harold Whitmore had built an empire on instincts, on knowing who to trust, who to invest in, who had the potential to build something from nothing. And tonight, dripping rain off the edge of a borrowed coat, he had his eyes set on Darius. As Darius handed over his tray and shared a booth with two strangers, Harold wasn't just grateful. He was calculating. Every word Darius spoke, every subtle gesture, was being measured. Across from him, Margaret Whitmore clutched her leather portfolio tighter. Inside were documents that bore not just their names, but Darius's. She had spent the last 72 hours assembling a detailed file, academic reports, testimonials from teachers, observations from neighbors. It wasn't just background, it was evidence. Because for the past 3 days, Darius had unknowingly been under surveillance. The Whitmores weren't just testing his generosity. They were confirming what they'd already begun to suspect. This boy was different. Earlier that week, Margaret had spoken with Mrs. Patterson, Darius's English teacher. Straight A's, respectful, driven, but more than that. He's got something you can't teach. Heart. They had followed him, not physically, but through the network of whispers that carries the truth of a community. He walks Mrs. Carter's groceries home every Tuesday. Tutors kids at the library, doesn't charge a cent. Gave up his bus fare so his grandma could afford her medication. Darius had no idea that these small acts had built a reputation, one that traveled faster than he ever could. Harold and Margaret were simply the final PISA human test, not one of intelligence, but of integrity. Now, as Darius leaned forward, flagging down Sandy to order more coffee for the couple, Harold made a silent decision. The boy passed. But this wasn't the kind of test you pass with a grade. This was the kind of test you pass with your soul. And the reward? It would make GPA scores and scholarships look like pennies. Margaret watched Darius carefully. The way he didn't gloat, the way he didn't ask for thanks, the way he made space at the booth like he belonged there and made them feel like they did too. She knew then. He wouldn't break under pressure. He wouldn't lose his way when given more. Because the truth was, they had seen potential before, but rarely had they seen character like this. Outside, Pete's tow truck rolled into the parking lot. The storm hadn't let up, but something inside the diner had changed. Not just warmth, but gravity. The kind of moment you feel settling in your bones. As Pete approached the table, Harold stood, his posture shifting subtly. Gone was the slouched, weary old man. In his place stood someone in command. His voice, when he spoke, was firm, direct. "Take care of that car. Whatever it needs." Pete blinked. "Yes, sir." Darius looked up, confused. He hadn't heard hesitation in Harold's voice before. Authority, yes. But this was something else. Confidence. Minutes later, Harold turned back to him and asked, "Son, what's your full name again?" "Darius Johnson." Harold pulled out a napkin, scribbled something, folded it, and slid it into his coat. "And your address?" Margaret said nothing, but her eyes didn't leave Darius's face. He gave it. Because why not? It wasn't like he had anything to hide. But what Darius didn't know, what no one had told him, was that the couple he thought were stranded nobodies were in fact the founders of one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the country. That the same gold logo he'd glimpsed on Margaret's portfolio was printed on the sides of buildings, scholarships, and clinics nationwide. And that tomorrow morning, before Darius even wakes up, Harold Whitmore will be on the phone with his lawyers, saying 6 simple words: "We found the one we need." Morning came like any other. But nothing about this day would be ordinary. The alarm clock didn't buzz. It hadn't worked in months. Darius simply woke up as he always did before the sun, before the world expected anything from him. He pulled on his same faded jeans, checked his pocket for bus fare, and prepared for another long day of school and work. But something felt off. There was a strange stillness in the air, like the city was holding its breath. Darius shook the feeling and stepped outside. The November chill was sharp, the sidewalk still wet from the night before. At Murphy's, Sandy met him at the back door, eyes wide. "You're not gonna believe this," she blurted before he could even clock in. "What?" he asked, slipping on his apron. "That old couple from last night? The ones you gave your meal to?" Pete says when he got to their car, a driver was already waiting. A black town car. Chauffeur in a suit. Darius paused, the dish towel in his hand frozen mid-air. "A driver?" Sandy nodded. Pete said the old man was giving orders like some big shot, talking about foundation protocols and candidate assessment. Sounded like something out of a corporate spy movie. Darius tried to brush it off, but the words echoed in his mind. Foundation. Candidate assessment. He went about his shift, but the thoughts clung to him like steam from the dishwater. Who were they really? And why had they asked for his address? By the time he got to school, the fog in his mind hadn't cleared. It didn't help that every hallway felt quieter than usual, that Mrs. Patterson barely looked at him during roll call, that whispers seemed to follow him like shadows. Then came the voice over the intercom. "Darius Johnson, please report to the principal's office." He froze. He had never once been called to the office, not for good or bad. His heart pounded as he stood up. When he opened the door to Principal Martinez's office, his breath caught. Sitting across from the desk, in freshly pressed clothes and with unreadable expressions, were Harold and Margaret Whitmore. Only now they looked nothing like the rain-soaked couple from the night before. Margaret's silver hair was styled, her posture straight, portfolio on her lap like a CEO in a board meeting. Harold's suit was dark, crisp, tailored to perfection. And when he stood, his presence filled the room. "Hello again, son," Harold said, his voice calm but commanding. Darius blinked. "What's going on?" Principal Martinez gestured for him to sit. "We have something to share with you," Margaret said. "But first, you deserve to know the truth." Over the next few minutes, the world Darius thought he knew began to crumble and rebuild at the same time. Harold and Margaret were not stranded travelers. They were the founders of the Whitmore Foundation, a $200 million philanthropic organization focused on building community development centers in underserved neighborhoods across the country. And for the past 72 hours, he had been their focus. "We've done hundreds of assessments," Harold explained, opening a thick folder with Darius's name on it. "But never one like this. You didn't just pass our test, you exceeded it." Margaret leaned in. "Last night, when you gave up your meal without hesitation, when you made space at the table for two people you didn't know, you confirmed what we'd heard from everyone else." The folder was filled with documents, academic records, testimonials from teachers, photographs, reports. "You've been watching me?" Darius asked, disbelief and confusion tangled in his voice. "Not watching," Harold said gently, "evaluating, listening, learning, but why?" Harold reached for a set of blueprints and spread them across the principal's desk. The words printed in bold across the top made Darius gasp. The Darius Johnson Community Development Center. "We want to build this," Margaret said. "Here, in your neighborhood, on the site of the old Riverside Mall." Darius stared at the detailed drawings. There were rooms labeled medical clinic, job training, library, technology lab, commercial kitchen. "You've got to be kidding." Harold's face was serious. "We're not. And we want you to help us build it, lead it, run it." Darius shook his head, overwhelmed. "I'm just a kid. I wash dishes. I don't know how to run anything." "That's where you're wrong," Margaret replied. "You've already proven you know how to lead by example." With integrity, they handed him a letter. A full scholarship tuition, housing, books, to any accredited university he chose. "And after graduation," Harold added, "you'll return here as assistant director. Then, in 2 years, you'll become director, with full salary, benefits, and authority." Darius stared at them, unsure if he was dreaming. "You've changed lives already," Harold said. "We just want to give you the tools to do it on a larger scale." Margaret folded his hand gently in hers. "We didn't choose you for your grades, though they're excellent. We didn't choose you for your resume. We chose you because you gave away the only meal you had when you thought no one was watching. And now, the world was watching." Darius sat in stunned silence, the weight of the moment crashing down like a wave. He had given up a meal, a simple act, and now he was being handed a mission to change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. And it all started with one word: yes. He looked up, looked Harold in the eye, and he said it. Yes. The moment Darius said yes, the energy in the room shifted. Harold leaned back, as if confirming something to himself, while Margaret's grip on the portfolio loosened. She opened it and began to lay out documents with practiced precision, each sheet more unbelievable than the last. "This is a full scholarship," she said, sliding one across the desk. "Tuition, room and board, books, meals, transportation, completely covered for 4 years at any accredited university you choose." Darius's eyes widened. He barely heard the words, but the numbers on the page told their own story. It wasn't just enough. It was everything. Margaret continued, "In the summers, you'll intern directly with our team. You'll work at existing Whitmore Foundation centers in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and Denver. You'll learn nonprofit operations, grant writing, fundraising, community development, all the tools you'll need to lead your own center." Harold picked up from there. "And when you graduate, you'll return here as assistant director of the new center. 2 years of hands-on leadership under our guidance. Then you'll step into the role of full director." Darius shook his head slowly, still unable to process. "You're serious?" "Deadly," Harold replied. "This is not charity. It's a partnership. We don't invest in people who don't lead from the front. We're not giving you power. We're recognizing the power you already have and giving you the infrastructure to use it." Margaret unfolded a blueprint and laid it flat. It took up nearly half the principal's desk. "There will be a medical clinic," she said, pointing to the labeled wings. "A technology lab with high-speed internet and modern computers. Classrooms for adult education, a commercial kitchen for job training, a library, a youth center, a counseling wing." Principal Martinez leaned forward. "This center isn't just a facility. It's a transformation hub. It'll touch thousands of lives every year." Darius blinked. "In my neighborhood?" "Yes," Margaret answered, "on the lot where the old Riverside Mall still sits. We've already begun negotiations for the land. You'll lead the planning committee. You'll help hire the staff. You'll design the programs." "But I'm just a kid." Harold smiled, but his voice was firm. "You're a leader. You've already built trust in your community. We can build walls and windows, but only you can build something people believe in." Margaret added softly, "The center will bear your name." Those words echoed. The Darius Johnson Community Development Center. He sat back, staring at the blueprints, at the mission statements, at the life being constructed before his very eyes. He thought of Miss Ruby, her breathing labored as she counted out pills, of the kids at Roosevelt High who shared broken keyboards and hand-me-down textbooks, of Jerome's mom working 3 jobs to barely cover rent. This wasn't a dream, it was a blueprint. Harold placed a pen in front of him. "Review everything. Talk to your grandmother. Visit our other centers. Take time. But know this, whether you take the director role or not, your college education is already funded. That's not conditional." Darius looked up. "Why?" Harold leaned forward. "Because you gave us something no one can fake, character. You didn't help us expecting anything. You helped us because someone needed help. That's leadership. That's integrity. And that's rare." Margaret smiled. "You didn't just pass the test, Darius. You rewrote it." Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away. He had questions, fears, doubts, but something inside him, a quiet, growing strength, was beginning to believe. Believe he belonged in the room. Believe he could change things. And maybe, just maybe, believe he was never just a dishwasher. He was a builder of places, of people, of futures. And it all began with one small act, one warm meal, one simple yes. That night, Darius didn't sleep. He lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling while the weight of 1,000,000 new possibilities settled over him, like a blanket, both comforting and terrifying. On his nightstand, next to a cracked lamp and his grandmother's Bible, sat the folder. the one with the Whitmore Foundation seal embossed in gold. Inside were promises, contracts, a college future, and architectural plans with his name in bold. The Darius Johnson Community Development Center. It felt unreal, like something meant for someone else, someone richer, someone older, someone more prepared. He turned and looked at Miss Ruby, asleep in her recliner beside her oxygen tank, the soft hiss and click of the machine filling the silence. She didn't know yet. He wanted to tell her everything, but the words felt too big, too unbelievable. He wondered what she would say. "You sure they didn't mistake you for somebody else?" He could almost hear her tease. But no, she would believe him. She always did. That morning, over lukewarm coffee and dry toast, Darius finally told her. Every word, the test, the dinner, the offer, the scholarship, the center. At first, she said nothing. She just looked at him, tears in her tired eyes. Then she smiled, slow and wide. "I told you," she whispered. "Kindness always circles back." She took his hand, her fingers frail but firm. "You've always been meant for more. This ain't a surprise. It's a confirmation." Still, Darius couldn't shake the doubt. Could he really do this? Build something so big, so meaningful, lead people older and more experienced than him? Miss Ruby saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You don't have to be the smartest in the room," she said. "Just the one willing to show up, to listen, to care." Those words followed him as he visited the Whitmore centers in Chicago and Atlanta the following week. Harold had arranged everything: flights, tours, meetings with directors. In Chicago, he met Jasmine, a former nurse now running a clinic inside a center, much like the one he'd seen in the blueprints. She walked him through crowded waiting rooms, classrooms buzzing with adult learners, job fairs in progress, kids getting tutoring help. "Most people think this job is about giving," Jasmine told him, "but it's really about building trust, building futures, building up people who've been torn down too long." In Atlanta, he met Marco, a tech entrepreneur turned youth mentor. He ran the job training wing. "We don't save people," Marco said. "We remind them they're worth saving themselves." Darius took notes, asked questions, observed. And when he returned home, something had shifted inside him. The fear was still there, but so was a spark, a belief. He walked the empty lot where the old Riverside Mall stood, cracked pavement, shattered glass, rusting steel bones. It looked forgotten. But Darius didn't see decay. He saw possibility. He saw the clinic where Miss Ruby could get care without rationing medicine. He saw a library where kids could finally access functioning computers. He saw a culinary program where Big Mike might train future chefs. He saw Jerome's mom earning certifications in business management. He saw life. And more than anything, he saw himself. Not as the dishwasher who once walked 3 miles to Murphy's Diner, but as a young man standing at the edge of something extraordinary. So he called Harold. "I've made my decision," Darius said. Harold's voice was calm, but proud. "And I want to do it. I want to build the center. I want to lead it, silence on the line." Then Harold's voice, filled with something deeper than approval, respect. "Welcome aboard, Director Johnson." Those words lit something in Darius's chest. The next day, Harold and Margaret returned to town. They met with city officials, real estate agents, contractors. They visited Roosevelt High and announced the plans publicly. A $25 million community development center led by a local hero. At school, students looked at Darius differently, some with awe, some with envy, but mostly with hope. Miss Patterson hugged him. "I always knew," she said. Big Mike gave him a nod across the diner kitchen. "About time someone saw what we've all seen." The local paper called him the kid who said yes. And yet, Darius didn't feel different. He still packed peanut butter sandwiches, still tutored younger students, still walked home through the same neighborhoods. But now, when he passed the lot where the mall once stood, he no longer saw ruin. He saw blueprints. He saw steel and glass and hope. He saw the future, his future. And it all started with a single meal, a choice made not for reward, but because someone needed help, and he had enough to give. What he didn't realize then was that the greatest gift he had offered wasn't the food. It was himself, his presence, his integrity, his belief that small kindness still mattered. That belief was now a building, and he was its foundation. 2 years later, the Darius Johnson Community Development Center stood as a symbol of everything people said couldn't happen in neighborhoods like his. Where once sat a decaying shopping mall, now rose a shimmering beacon of opportunity. Glass walls welcomed the sun. Clean, open spaces buzzed with life. The faded past had been replaced by a future in motion. Darius, now 22, sat behind his desk. His desk as director of the center. He'd returned after college, just as promised. But the suit he wore didn't change the core of who he was. He still greeted every guest by name, still swept the front steps when no one was looking, still showed up early and stayed late. On his office wall were photos. Miss Ruby holding her cane with a proud smile, the first GED graduates, the ribbon cutting with Harold and Margaret in the background, students in the computer lab, local moms launching small businesses from the culinary incubator. Every image was a reminder that change wasn't theory. It was visible. On Tuesday afternoons, he still volunteered in the tutoring room. On Thursdays, he ran leadership workshops for teens. On weekends, he walked the neighborhood, checking in with residents. And every so often, he went back to Murphy's Diner. One rainy night, much like the one that changed everything, Sandy came rushing to the kitchen. "Darius, I know you're off the clock, but there's a young couple out front. Hispanic, 2 little kids. They say their car broke down on the interstate. No money, nothing to eat." Darius looked out the window. There they were. The woman clutched her child. The man rubbed his temples, counting coins that wouldn't stretch far. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed 2 meals from the counter, walked to the booth, and with the same quiet tone he'd used years ago, said, "This one's on me tonight." The woman blinked, unsure. The man stammered, "But you don't even know us." "I don't have to," Darius replied. "You're here. You need help. That's enough." They ate with gratitude written in every bite. After the meal, Darius sat down beside them. "What do you do for work?" he asked. The man, Miguel, said he'd done construction back home. The woman, Rosa, had experience in childcare. They just didn't have paperwork, references, or anyone to vouch for them. Darius reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple business card. On the back, he wrote their names, their number, and a time to meet. "Come by the center tomorrow. We might be able to help the next day." Miguel was placed in a job training program for electricians. Rosa began orientation with the early childhood development team. Their kids enrolled in the after-school program. Within a month, Miguel had full-time work. Rosa was volunteering at the center, and the family had moved into stable housing 2 blocks away. 1 meal. Again. That night, Harold called. "How's the quarterly progress report looking, Director Johnson?" he asked. Darius smiled. Miguel Santos just finished his first week on the job. Rosa is shadowing in our youth wing. We added 3 new hires and enrolled 17 new students this month. Harold chuckled. And to think, it all started with a burger and fries. It started with you, Darius said. No, Harold corrected. It started with you choosing to care when no one was watching. After the call, Darius walked through the quiet center. The lights were dimmed. The air carried the scent of cleaning supplies and fresh hope. He stopped by the lobby, looked up at the gold lettering across the glass, the Darius Johnson Community Development Center, and beneath it, transforming lives. Together. He thought of every person who said he was just a kid from Elm Street, of every doubt, of every sacrifice. And then he thought of the countless others like Miguel, like Rosa, who just needed a chance. As he turned off the lights, he whispered to himself, one meal can change everything. But the story doesn't end there, because right now, somewhere, another young person is sitting in a worn booth, holding a meal they've saved days to buy. And across from them, someone is in need. You may never know when you're being watched. You may never realize the ripple your kindness creates. But what if your choice to care right now could change someone's future? What if you are someone's turning point? Here's what I want you to do. Think of one time someone showed you kindness when you didn't expect it. Drop it in the comments. Share this story. Remind someone else that they matter. Because the world changes not in grand speeches, but in quiet choices. One meal, one name, one heart at a time. And maybe, just maybe, you're the next Darius Johnson.